The New York Mets have had some of the worst ownership throughout their times in the big leagues. I'm talking lawsuits, unbelievable amounts of debt, and to go along with all of that, the worst part, it panned out for a losing baseball team on the field. As a sport fan, most of us have that one team we root for that is consistently mismanaged, struggling, and always making the wrong move. For me, I'm a Boston fan, so suck it. But for Steve Cohen, it was a little bit different. Even being a man with a net worth of $16 billion, his life was not fulfilled. His life needed more to it. So he decided in the middle of a pandemic, after watching his Mets get destroyed as usual, to go out and purchase the majority of the Mets. Now he had a 95% stake after purchasing it, but it was not for a cheap price. It was for $2.4 billion. Now, buying a sports team nowadays, most of the time you're going to get an owner that is willing to spend some money. Obviously, if you're going to be spending that much to buy the team, you would think that they would spend that much to invest in that team. Well, Steve Cohen took that personal because he went out and used that quote immediately to his own personal use. His first moment as owner was the Mets' 2021 offseason. This team simply was not in World Series contention and maybe wasn't even close. Cohen said, "Not close? I'll change that." And he made a massive blockbuster trade quite immediately, bringing in superstar shortstop Francisco Lindor. The issue, he had an expiring contract, and well, at least we thought it could be a potential issue, but in reality, Cohen knew all along he was going to remain a Met despite the expiring contract. He later extended him before opening day. It was very urgent on Cohen's end, and you gotta give him credit for doing that. Fast forward to the 2021 Mets deadline, and the Mets make a few aggressive moves, and that includes trading a top prospect in Pete Crow Armstrong for an inconsistent bat and Javier Baez, who was probably at his lowest price ever with the Chicago Cubs, considering he was in a contract year. Not to mention, he wasn't playing very good. Javier had good history with Francisco Lindor, so it was thought that it would make for a pretty good infield. That would be true for Baez, but Francisco Lindor couldn't hit a meatball if you gave him one down the middle. Javier Baez had a .299 average with the Mets, and it paid off for the whole year, especially for Javier Baez, who was going into a contract year and needed to get paid. And based off of that 2021 performance with the Mets, again, he was going to be asking for a bag. The Mets let him walk, and he went to the Tigers, where he has, by the way, been pretty awful, but that's besides the point. Javier Baez has not been good with the Tigers, we know that. But the Mets were okay, because the Mets had a very aggressive offseason. They signed infielder Eduardo Escobar to a 2-year, $20 million deal, and ultimately, the veteran had a not good 2022 and got traded recently in 2023 of June. Even though he didn't pan out, don't worry, because they signed Mark Canha to a 2-year, $26 million contract, and he's actually had a decent bat, maybe not quite what you would have really hoped, but it's been decent, with a phenomenal arm in the outfield. I mean, it is incredible what he's able to do. Although he is rumored to be on the trade block right now, so don't get your hopes up. They also brought in Starling Marte on a 4-year contract worth $78 million. His 2022 was great, but the 2023 season has been awful. If you see a trend, I mean, you should, because some of these guys are panning out, others are not at all. Committing such big money with it only working a little bit of the time, right? Only about 25% of these guys are actually playing good, the rest are struggling. The last guy that they signed was starting pitcher and arguably the best arm in all of baseball, Max Scherzer, to a 3-year, $130 million contract. He was making bank. And while being injured for a decent bit of the 2022 season, he still managed to put up a decent little ERA number, 2.29. By decent, obviously, I meant fantastic. They finished that 2022 season as a 100-win team, but lost as soon as they got into the playoffs. So with the 100 wins, Steve Cohen said, well, I'll attempt to turn that into an extra 20 wins. That's at least what his mindset was going into the offseason, because He spent money on superstar veteran pitcher Justin Verlander on a 2-year contract that guarantees $43 million per season. We'll get into it for a moment, but it's safe to say it just really doesn't look like a good contract right now, just based off of where that Mets team is at, and not to mention he is 40 years old. He also spent on Kodai Senga, who got a 5-year contract worth $75 million. He also completely revitalized that bullpen, at least it's what he thought, right? Bringing in multiple different arms. Let's just say they haven't panned out. And he, of course, retained 2 superstars who are already on the team, and Brandon Nimmo and Edwin Diaz. Well, you would say that he spent this much money, so it would just make no sense for them to fail. Well, they did. So what went wrong? Well, a plunger of different things, right? We could start with Edwin Diaz. Of course, the best closer in all of baseball. They gave him a giant contract just for him to suffer a season-ending injury, celebrating after a very clutch inning by him in the World Baseball Classic. This was the beginning to a series of unfortunate events. This includes the entire lineup for getting out a hit, outside of course, Pete Alonso. And yes, I mean literally everyone outside of Pete Alonso. Not to mention, manager, of course, the veteran, Buck Showalter, has completely forgot how to manage a bullpen. The injuries for Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander have piled up, and on top of all of that, the team has just completely gave up. As Frank Fleming could, of course, tell you that is. So where do you go from here? Well, Max Scherzer has recently been traded to the Texas Rangers for Ronald Acuna Jr.'s little brother. So that's at least something to get excited about. He should be a beast. I think getting young and intriguing prospects on this team is going to be key to its really, I guess, long-term success, along with Steve Cohen keeping faith. Even after this, really that's the most important thing, is keeping your faith. He came into a situation with a bad front office, bad coaching staff, and not to mention an all-around team that has just not won in its franchise history. I believe that this team finally has a direction, which is a direction of young prospects. And that direction is not spending billions and billions of dollars just for no result. That direction is developing prospects. I believe if they continue this really trend of these prospects, the Mets could get on the right foot finally. Although, even if these prospects do pan out, Francisco Lindor and Starling Marte have got to start playing like the superstars that you paid them to be. That is the most important thing right now for the New York Mets. Anyways, that is the story of the brutal New York Mets. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Of course, pray for Frank Fleming and his heart, and I'll see you in the next one.